Yeah, so the goal of the project is to explore the creative process. And I believe a viewer is also very creative, but we focus on the artist. And so this is one thing. Now, there's still many ways you can do that. And within AI, you kind of have different trends. One trend is called data-centric AI, in which you collect a lot of data and you try to detect patterns in this data. Use neural network techniques like deep learning, for example. So this is possible. But I'm sort of more inclined towards what is called human-centric AI, which is an AI where you take meaning into account. So it's sort of, instead of collecting lots of data, you focus on the meaning and how meaning comes into existence, how meaning is extracted from a painting or a sentence, what structures we build to do that. And I believe that for human-centric AI, the study of art is very interesting because, you know, you could say the artists are people specialized in creating objects like a painting, which triggers all sorts of meaning creation processes in the viewer. So the artist manipulates. I view the artist as a cognitive engineer, actually, who is fiddling around with our mental processes to influence this process of meaning creation. And so this is what, in this project, we want to understand. So it's, on the one hand, pushing AI forward. You know, most people do this data-centric AI, which is, I wouldn't say easy, but you take your data, you take your learning mechanisms, and okay, you crank, you know, and you get some results. But here, I view it more as a pushing the boundaries of AI in the direction of meaning, because that's where it is stuck. So then, to be more concrete, you know, we looked at the work of Luc Tuymans, not to extract patterns, but to understand his artistic method, I would say, how he creates. And the great thing about AI is that it forces you to be very concrete, you know, because you might have an idea. You have to translate that idea into some sort of program, and then you run it, and then you see whether your idea makes sense. And so in this case also, we explore ideas on, for example, how he transforms an image, a found image, into a painting, and all the different steps and considerations that take place in that process. And so with AI, we can completely deconstruct this extraordinarily complex process, and that's what I'm trying to do in this project. There are many possible relations between AI and art. Some people use AI to create new art. Others use AI to study art, the artifacts themselves, you know, in conservation, or to build search engines, or you know. So this is one way. Now the other way is AI is actually is like psychology, so it is studying mental processes, and it could study the process of interpretation by the viewer, or the production, the creative production by the artist. Now, it's very different from psychology, because The method is not observing humans, but is building systems that emulate aspects of these mental processes. So this is another way to probe deeper into the art process to understand it better. And then with this understanding, you can do many things. So now there's still other things, but these are kind of the two main ways in which I think there's a relation between AI and art. Yeah, there is of course the idea that art is created in a mysterious, intuitive, emotional process. But actually, when you talk with painters or composers or writers, then there's a certain art in the sense of skill and technical know-how, how to do things. And so the artist is not so, let's say, irrational and intuitive as you may think. They don't like to talk about it. Some artists do, and Luc Tuymans is interesting for me because he can talk about what he's doing, and he's willing to talk about it. And he can also point to a painting, whether it is Caravaggio or anyone else, and be very specific about the method, the artistic method that is being used. So in that sense, this doesn't mean, because meaning has many facets, right? There's the purely formal aesthetic meaning, like in an abstract painting, but then there's the factual meaning, what is there, what is depicted. But there's also the expressive meaning, the emotion. There is the cultural meaning. What does this image mean? There's also the goal of the artist. Why did he pick this topic now? And all of these things, you see, so they're all together. It's one web of meanings, and they include the emotional and the perspective, and maybe a political statement or social issues, And so they all come together, and they're captured then in this one painting. And this is the force of art, that it is able to do that, and including what I would call pre-verbal meanings or non-verbal meanings, which we cannot express, nicely, but they are there, but not every meaning that we deal with can be expressed in words. And so the artworks can express or can reflect or evoke meanings that are not so easy to describe. So, so I think it may look like it's a very rational way to approach the subject, but it is true. It's a sort of, we ask about the artistic method and how does it work, and then you have to become technical. Of course, when you stand before the work, you forget about all that. Or if you listen to, I don't know, an opera by Wagner, you just sit there and it happens. But I mean, the construction of this opera was based on enormous technical skills of the composer, and every note is there for a particular purpose. And it can be explicated why it is there, So I think the same, to some extent, maybe less, but the same is true for painting. So artificial intelligence, well, it's not one tool, of course. It's a whole set of tools. And you can use them for different things. I mean, it's a toolbox. And the things that I've been doing give you certain tools to detect centers of interest in a painting, which maybe you didn't see, when you just looked. But if you go through this process, then it brings out the centers of interest and how they have been created. And so I see this tool like, you know, in conservation, for example, they take scanning, they do X-rays, they use whatever tools to see things that you couldn't see before. Now, this is mostly for conservation. But so with these AIs, like a microscope. And so you can see, and then you see things which maybe you already saw, or maybe you didn't, or you now see it in a different way. You know, so it's for the viewer, I think it's a process of making you much more aware of what you're looking at. Now, whether this is useful for the artist is another matter. But I think if I'm a designer, well, I write computer programs, and when I write them, then I want to see whether they work. You know, and if they don't work, then I want to find out why they don't work, and I fix it. So the painters also, and you hear that when he, you know, in the way he talks about his practice, is he said, well, I first, for example, secrets, I first used the exact size that was in the original image of this figure, which is spear, you know, and then I found out that it doesn't work. So I had to erase that approach, and I had to stretch and you know, pull the thing. So this means that he himself, you know, he's looking at the result of particular action on the painting while he's painting, and then he will correct it. He will say, oh, this is not working. You know, working means whatever is there that is not expressing the meanings that he wanted to express. Because he says, well, it becomes too much figurative. It's too much the original image. I don't want it. I want it more, you know, well, he talks about taking away the 3D effect of the painting. So these are all examples of, I would say, conscious decisions that he's making while he's painting. And with these tools, you know, I can imagine that you use them to look, you being the painter, you know, you try out what this is doing with these microscopic AI tools, how they look at the painting. But we have to see about that. You know, it's too early to, of course, in many fields today, people are using AI already for design, for scheduling, for diagnosis, for all sorts of tools. So, you know, it's quite logical that there might be something popping up that would be useful, not just for the viewers or the art critics or the, you know, art historians, all these people, but also for the painter. So the interactions we're having are I think, positive in the sense that he's interested in what is going on, partly to find out what AI is all about, and to get beyond the hype, you know. Many claims are being made about AI which are just hype. And so by doing it and by applying it to his own work, he can really see what the limits are, because there are extraordinary limits on what we can do today. I mean, there is progress in the field continuously, but even a simple thing like doing a reverse search for the image, the original image, given a painting, is already something that's beyond current search engines. And many more things, you know, the edge detection, for example, the lines, to get back to the lines, is also something that there's been a lot of progress. We have many algorithms, but it's not so obvious to do. And many of the techniques have been developed for natural images, and they don't work for paintings. First of all, an AI does not exist. I mean, as I said, AI is a toolbox. And so it depends on the tool that you use. But so many of these tools are purely at the level of image processing. So they are about detecting features like edges, contrasts, color, variations, all of that. So these are features. And then you go one level. So if you use these, I mean, you could say this AI system doesn't see anything, it's just transforming images in other images. It's certainly not understanding the image. And so this is really, the first thing is sensation, pure sensation. And so you go from sensation and you want to go towards understanding. Now, are there today AI systems which can understand a painting like we do, if you look carefully? No, this is not possible. I mean, there are attempts, and they go from pure sensation to features, then to recognize patterns, to recognize what's on a painting, But these are all big projects where people work for years to try and recognize everyday objects on paintings. And some of it works, some of it doesn't work. All these steps require vast amounts of computation. So it's not to run on your mobile phone, Also, the training of these models takes vast amount of computation with billions of examples. So I think there's no simple answer, because we try with AI to get closer to understanding. And how far are we? Well, I would say not so far. How far are we with that? Well, some people look at the form and then create works in the same style of, but they do statistical analysis of the forms, the form of the painting, and they give, let's say, the complete collection of Van Gogh paintings, and then you give it a picture and it will draw in the style of Van Gogh. Now, if you tell this to an artist, I mean, they will say that this is not art, right? And the artist is absolutely right. So now you could say that the person doing this and using it for his art is the artist, but certainly not the AI system. But so in this case, again, we can try to go further, and we can talk about meanings and about expression, and how you achieve certain effects with certain painterly techniques and so on. But all of these things, I mean, the human mind is so incredibly complex and rich that it is, it is ignorance to say that we can simulate that in computers today. This is a total, how would I say, underestimation of what humans do. So, since the beginning, actually, the beginning of AI is in the 1950s. There were people who were already thinking about using AI to do creativity. In the beginning, mostly in the domain of music, in fact. With Lechard and Hiller is the most important person. Now, basically what he and then many generations after him and still today say is creativity when either you define a grammar of some sort, like, you know, the sonata, grammar for sonatas, or for painting particular grammar. And then you fill in the details. So, and you generate variations on that. So this is, now, I don't think this is very creative, but this is presented as being creative. Or story, you know, creation of stories, you make a story grammar, and then you create a variant of that. More recently, with neural networks, the idea is to not write the grammar, but that this grammar is learned, you know, but it's more statistical, it's less based on structural patterns, I mean symbolic structures, but it is more based on statistical patterns. But it's the same idea, you extract the structure and then you generate a new work by variations, by choices, random choices on how you fill in the details of this pattern. So I don't think that this is really what creativity is all about. I mean, so then the question is, what is it about, right? But I would say it is about finding new solutions to problems. Now, the problem in the case of artworks is about expressing certain things, you know, and about the coherence of an image, and I mean all the things that we have been talking about with Luc Tuymans. And so and then you see that every artist has a method, an artistic method, or more than one, but it's a method that he develops or she develops, you know, over years, and change, and the method evolves and changes. That's also what Tuymans says about his own work, that his method of doing things is changing. And so which means that he is creative in the method that he's using. So he's coming up with new ways of achieving certain effects, or he finds new effects that he couldn't do before, using an existing method and maybe creating a variation, or maybe even an error at some point, which then creates novelty. So it's a bit like an evolutionary process, except of course that it's not by random mutations, but it is by practicing the art and discovering new things and thinking up new ways to do things that the creativity takes place. And so this form of creativity is obviously much more difficult for AI systems to emulate. But you know, but that's where I think we have to search for it. And again, studying artists and how they create new works and how their work evolves over time, and how viewers view a work and the viewing of a work changes over time, is interesting material, if you want, to help us understand the creative process.